Okay, recording in progress. So I am delighted to welcome Professor Burde and Rena Deitz to give today's PRIISM seminar. Burde is an associate professor and director of international education at NYU's Steinhardt School, an affiliate faculty with NYU's Politics Department, NYU Abu Dhabi, the NYU Wagner School of Public Service, and the Saltzman Institute of War and Peace Studies at Columbia. Her book, Schools for Conflict or Peace in Afghanistan, recently won the 2017 Grawemeyer Award for Ideas Improving World Order. Dr. Burde's research focuses on the effects of conflict on education, the efforts of humanitarian organizations to mitigate these effects, and the relationship between education and political violence or peace. Rena is a doctoral candidate in international education at NYU. Her research interests focus on education in humanitarian contexts, especially those affected by conflict. Her research aims to improve and measure social and emotional and cognitive skills in the aftermath of or during ongoing conflict, especially among adolescents. Rena has worked in international education for nearly a decade, developing and studying education and social emotional learning programs across diverse contexts and populations, including for refugees and displaced populations in the Middle East, East and West Africa, Asia, Europe, and the United States. And we're delighted to welcome both Professor Burde and Rena to give the talk today titled, Can Foreign Aid Boost State Legitimacy During Conflict? Experimental Evidence from Education Aid in Afghanistan. So with that, I'll turn it over to both of you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Ravi, and thanks everyone for coming, for joining us today, and for inviting us to give this talk. We are so thrilled to be here to talk about this work. It has been something that we've been working on for, well, I've been working on for many, many years, as many of you know, and it's really exciting to get to this point where we are ready to present the work and talk about it in a lot of detail. And I'm very excited to be here with Rena Deitz, who's a co-author with me on this paper. And I'm sorry that Cyrus Sammy and Joel Middleton can't be with us today, but they were also instrumental in the project from the start in 2014. So really 2013, actually. So we've been working together on this work for many years. And maybe I'll say that quite a few times throughout because it's very prominent in my mind, as you can imagine. Okay, so what we're going to describe to you today is first the motivation for carrying out this particular study, which focuses on state legitimacy, the relationship between education and state legitimacy, as Ravi mentioned. Then we'll talk about the background to the work, the study design, the findings, and discussion and conclusion. This picture that you see here is a picture that I took in a village that we were collecting data in 2008. So that was my previous research. I did a study on community-based education that started way back in 2005. And those findings are findings that we built on in this study. So why are we interested in this question? Strengthening state legitimacy is a critical ingredient in aid organizations' state building efforts in conflict-affected societies. And it was particularly so in pre-Taliban Afghanistan. As you recall, the US government was involved in stabilizing Afghanistan and sent troops to Afghanistan beginning in 2001. And of course, as you also know, the government pulled out in August 2021. But during those 20 years, there was much focus on strengthening state stability and doing so through building legitimacy. In other words, improving citizens' perceptions of the government, trust in institutions. So the chain of the causal chain is meant to work like this. First, direct outcomes such as improved education and health services are thought to lead to a positive response among the local population, which then is thought to increase trust in and strengthen legitimacy of the government, which is thought to stabilize the state. Here's an illustration of how that is meant to work from none other than the former director of the World Bank, Robert Zoellick. You can see him here talking about state stabilization. I'm joking. I don't know what he's actually talking about in that picture, but it looks like he could be. So in 2009, the president of the World Bank called for legitimacy to become the strategic center of gravity for all state building interventions. It's hard to overstate the importance that this has for aid interventions in conflict-affected countries, particularly US interventions. And I should note that in keeping with a number of our colleagues, particularly in political science, we define legitimacy as trust in government. We can talk a little bit more about that if you would like later in the talk. We use trust and legitimacy somewhat interchangeably in this paper. So the question is really, do social services improve trust? In the West, it's broadly accepted that providing good quality social services improves citizens' trust in government when institutions are strong. So then we wonder, is this relationship also true when institutions are weak? For example, perhaps conflict undermines or obscures the benefits of services to communities. We wonder if foreign aid agencies, particularly international NGOs, deliver these services. When they deliver these services, does credit go to the international organizations? That would be a plausible response, not to the government. Or when populations are very hostile to the government, they might hold negative views of the government. Could it be that those services still would increase legitimacy and trust in the government, even with a very hostile population? Remember that we're talking about Afghanistan, where there was a lot of unevenness in reactions to the government and some amount of hostility, depending on the population. Well, quite a bit of hostility all around, actually. So in these cases, perhaps even if there are positive outcomes from the international NGOs' work, these outcomes will not affect government legitimacy. This is a question we wanted to understand better. We examine the effects of education aid. So to answer these questions, this paper examines the effects of education aid provided, as I mentioned, by international non-governmental organizations in war-affected Afghanistan on Afghan citizens' perceptions of their government legitimacy. And we argue that despite the Taliban takeover in 2021, our findings remain vital in understanding how aid can contribute to state building, even in the most challenging circumstances. Here's just to remind you, to take you back to August 15th, or in fact, August 16th, 2021. This is the day after the Taliban took over the government in Kabul. They are occupying the presidential palace in this photo taken by the New York Times. So taking us back way before August 2021, this is a picture that I took in the Panjshir Valley in Afghanistan in 2006. There have been many years of conflict, as I'm sure you know. If you know nothing else about Afghanistan, you certainly know that. And I'm sure many of you know a lot about Afghanistan. But at the time of this particular study, Afghanistan was devastated by conflict. Approximately 4 million children in school, 4 million children in Afghanistan were out of school. It was approximately 44% of the primary school age population. This is around 2018, those figures. What we are talking about today, these data were collected in 2014 and 2015, but part of this broader study from 2014 to 2019. More than 132 billion was spent from the United States between fiscal year 2002 and roughly 2018. And that broke down into the majority for security, but a certain amount for development, 28%. And some of the aid, about $1 billion of the aid, was devoted to education from the United States in about 20 years of occupation of support to the Afghan government. As some of you know, I started conducting research, and as I mentioned, on education in Afghanistan in 2005. There were, of course, during this time, many years, I just have to mention many years of challenges, of heartbreak, of norm-shattering findings, gratifying policy take-up. I mean, we had remarkable take-up from the results of our study, which showed that when you put community-based schools in villages, parents send their children. They send not only their boys, but also their girls. And when they send their children to community-based schools, children learn. And in fact, we showed that these schools closed the achievement gap, or narrowed the achievement gap, and closed the attendance gap between boys and girls. But in early days, there were lots of questions. So we started that. We built on what we had found in these early years of the study. There was a resounding yes to all of our questions about how community-based education works. I realize I haven't exactly told you what community-based education is. International NGOs employ community-based education where the state is weak, access to education is limited, there are no new buildings, communities provide space and a teacher, NGOs organize the communities, they train and monitor the schools, and government sends textbooks. In this case, that's common across the world. These are interventions that I'm describing in Afghanistan, but this is a very common intervention provided by aid organizations in countries around the world. This is an example of a community-based school in this study. So just to show you the gains from this work, in our earlier work, the gains were dramatic. There was about a 40 percentage point increase in attendance, 30% to 70% overall for boys and girls in community-based schools. 2016, there were substantial gains. We demonstrated substantial gains. We think the gains are lower in 2016 because there was just greater reach by the government. So there was less need for community-based schools. And then you see also in learning, there was dramatic gains in learning as well, in both points in time. And I show you this information about the value of the education because our argument rests on a service that parents value being able to alter their perception of government, right? So it's important to understand the program, how the program worked and how well it worked. This is a chart that actually JPAL developed to show the effects of community-based schools in relation to other kinds of educational interventions. INGOs, schools produce substantial gains. So here you can see exactly how much Afghan parents value community-based education and education in general. We asked across ethnic groups, we asked ethnic groups across Afghanistan, and consistently we heard that, yes, there is no doubt of the value of this service in Afghanistan across the board, all ethnic groups, and virtually without variation. We see that parents value education. Here are the results of those findings. The questions we asked parents about how long boys should go to school, when they should stop school, when girls should stop school. And you see that the response drops somewhat when we get into the higher grades, but still there's very strong support. So this is a picture from one of the areas, from War province, one of the areas where we were collecting data. We collected data across the center of the country, 6 provinces across the center, and the full RCT sample consists of villages located across Bamiyan, Daikuni-Gor, Herat, Kapisa, and Parwan. And within the full sample, there were 197 villages. We assigned 144 villages to the community-based education treatment condition. The remaining 53 were assigned to the control, but note that for the present study, we're working with data only from 96 villages, so a subset of what I'm showing you here. 72 were treated and 24 were control. This was because our NGO counterparts felt that security conditions in these locations permitted us to ask questions about the government that were deemed sensitive. And those provinces were Bamiyan, Daikuni-Gor, and Herat. Oops. Okay, so one question is, how do we measure legitimacy? Measures of legitimacy in conflict-affected contexts often ask limited questions. For example, some of our colleagues ask questions about confidence in different levels of government and institutions, but only one question. Another study asks one question about local and international institutions in Syria, for example, focusing on if they support the community and if the community supports them. And one question about satisfaction with and confidence in multiple government actors that was carried out in Afghanistan by the Asia Foundation. So we're consistent in the way in which we ask questions about legitimacy and how we measure it. Specifically, we asked questions about trust and satisfaction with national and local governments, school officials, non-governmental organizations to measure legitimacy as well as their accountability for education. We developed indices of legitimacy for 4 actors: national government, local government, NGO, 3 actors in this case, about government legitimacy. This is based on satisfaction with their performance and perception of the actors' concern for them. We also created education-specific indices of legitimacy comprising questions related to the importance of the actor's role in education, satisfaction with performance, assistance in the case of issues with education, and which actor they define as best able to say what is best for a child's education. Our program, the community-based program, was funded in part to match the research project. So we had remarkable conditions for carrying out this work. The design of the project, the design of the questions we worked with our implementing partners and also some of the interested funders to create questions before the study began. And then we were able to work very closely with the implementing partners to ensure fidelity to design throughout the project. The baseline data collection, as I mentioned, was carried out in 2014. It included approximately 4,000 households. Again, this is the larger number. I gave you the numbers for the smaller study, the smaller subset that we're working with in this particular paper. We also complemented our quantitative data with qualitative interviews with NGO and government representatives to understand public service motivation. We carried out approximately 200 interviews with NGOs and civil servants. So now I'm going to turn it over to Rena, who is going to speak about education-related legitimacy. And Rena, just let me know when you want me to change the slides.
So you can turn over to the next slide. So we'll start by speaking about the effects on education-related legitimacy. So we might expect this to be the most likely to have a positive effect, and especially with NGOs. And we did find statistically significant effects for the provision of CBE related to education-related legitimacy, but for both NGOs and government officials. And these questions were non-specified as to the level of the government official. So you'll see on the next slide, which we can go to, that we also looked at general legitimacy. So these were the questions that Dana was mentioning about confidence in and satisfaction with government officials, generally speaking. And we found statistically significant effects for the provision of community-based education across all levels of government actors. But interestingly, here you see it's not statistically significant, though it is positive for NGO actors. Go to the next slide. So in this, so we were first, as you saw in the first 2 slides of the findings, we were thrilled to find that it had this positive effect on government legitimacy. Then we wanted to look more deeply at whether there was a heterogeneity, whether the effect was true across all ethnicities and religions. And so we were working in a primarily ethnically Hazara region, and Hazaras have historically been excluded from government positions and held anti-government sentiment. So we were curious whether the positive effects that we saw overall would be true among Hazaras as well. And so what you can see under the model, let's see. So what this is actually, this is kind of the Hazara, sorry, is the baseline category here. So I was looking for it on the table to give you an actual number. But you can see that there is a statistically significant difference with other ethnicity and Pashtun at the national government level. But not statistically significant for a provincial government. So we found that there are still significant effects across all ethnicities, and that is true across religion as well, though no statistically significant difference across Sunni and Shia. So we took this and we were interested then at understanding what the effect would be. We can go to the next slide for this. By two additional factors that we had not initially looked into and actually didn't collect data for in the study initially. And so we looked to outside data for these two analyses. First, we were interested in the effect heterogeneity by district level vote share for the incumbent president. So whether the district voted for or against the incumbent. And contrary to our expectations, we found that levels of national and provincial legitimacy were significantly lower in the study districts with higher incumbent support. So the effects tended to increase in vote. The introduction of CBE offset the variation, though it was not statistically significant at the national level, as you can see here. So going on to the next slide, we were also interested because, as Dana mentioned, and as I believe you are all aware, Afghanistan has varying levels of violence across the country. And so we were interested in understanding, as well as we could, the effect of district level security incidents. So we were looking at the number of security incidents over the study time period. And we found that, as expected, government legitimacy was initially lower at both the national and provincial levels in areas with higher levels of insecurity. This logically makes sense. But we found that the positive effect of CBE increased with the number of security incidents, although this interaction effect is not statistically significant at the national level. So these results further support an optimistic account for foreign aid and show that service provision can increase legitimacy even in the areas with higher levels of insecurity. So I'll pass it over to Dana for the conclusion implications.
Thank you so much, Rena. I'm just reminded how wonderful it's been working with you on this project, Rena. So great to hear you presenting these results. Government legitimacy, as you see then, appreciation of local schools translated into trust in NGOs, as well as in local, provincial, and national government. And trust in government generalized beyond the local level. These are crucial findings. We think they hold enormous significance, not just in Afghanistan, but beyond, we think. But let me just mention a couple of points that might increase or undermine these findings in the context of pre-2021 Afghanistan, right? So now I'm talking about that 20-year window of US support and occupation. Gains or losses that could undermine legitimacy include the common threats pre-Taliban, which included security issues that Rena mentioned. We found that those weren't incredibly salient, but sudden cuts to aid programs, the start and stop cycles of aid. Those of you who are familiar with aid on the call are deeply familiar with the fickle behavior of funders. They will decide because a CEO or maybe a government, more likely a government, is interested in particular direction for the aid to support a particular type of intervention, and that can be a fad that is fleeting, maybe will last for 1 year, maybe will last for 5 years, but at some point the aid stops, the project is ended, and frequently there is limited limited effort to promote sustainability, despite a lot of discussion about sustainability. I should mention that we have another paper that specifically addresses this question of sustainability. We do have some really good findings on how to actually sustain projects after they end. But political priorities shift, as I mentioned, and it's critical that funders consider these questions more deeply when they decide to make their grants in aid. I'm going to leave you with a couple of ideas for next steps, a couple of thoughts. I mean, really specifically thinking about Afghanistan today. Taliban today, I would argue, should be careful what they wish for. As you know, they have outlawed girls' secondary school education. They've outlawed women attending university. They have restricted women's mobility such that it's illegal for women to go to public parks. I'd like you to think about that for a minute. Women, according to the Taliban, are increasingly meant to be invisible in public. This is a dramatic challenge to any society. It's a dramatic challenge to a society where resources are so limited. But I would argue their decision to outlaw girls' education at the secondary school level is deeply unpopular, not just with urbanites, but with their base, with men, heads of households living in rural areas, and we have data to show this. So I anticipate there will be changes in Afghanistan. I'm hopeful. I try to be hopeful, but we'll see. I'll keep you posted. I would like to also just call out thanks to a few of our colleagues who are here on the call with us, in the Zoom room with us, Hamidullah, Abdulhamid, and Joed, who are three really important colleagues who helped carry out the data collection in Afghanistan, are now here at NYU. So I'm thrilled that they're also here with us today on the call. We'd love to hear your questions and your thoughts and your comments. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, what is your practice? Do you usually then take down the slides and have
we can leave the slides up. I think the first thing is I'm gonna thank you on behalf of everybody for your talk. It was super interesting, and I think maybe we can leave the slides up just in case folks want to refer to a point that was raised in the slides. But yeah, let's open it up for questions. So if anybody has a question, feel free to unmute yourself or ask in the chat, however you prefer.
I should also call out Susanna Toro-Isasa, who now works for PRIISM, but was one of my students in international education and then worked with us on this project for many years before transitioning to PRIISM. Over to you all.
I'll jump in, get the ball rolling. So thanks for a fabulous presentation. It's just amazing the work you've done, and so heartbreaking where things have ended up. Do you have thoughts about doing this same kind of work in similar countries? I mean, I don't even know if similar countries is like a thing you can say when you're talking about Afghanistan, but like, what are your thoughts about what you've learned from this and where that could take you if you were doing work in other conflict affected countries?
That's a great question. With respect to government legitimacy, I think it would be interesting. I mean, the evidence for this relationship between services and government legitimacy in conflict affected countries, as we show, is thin. I feel like I've worked a lot on community-based education, as you know. I, at this point, am thinking about other questions. That doesn't mean I wouldn't be interested in it down the line, but I think at the moment in Afghanistan, as some of you know, we're starting to work on questions related to girls and boys secondary education, thinking about how to sustain that in these current times. Yeah, but we have a perhaps. I mean, I guess the answer for me is perhaps. Rena might have a different take on that. I see Larry's hand up and Elizabeth's hand up. Rena, do you want to respond?
Somehow we didn't hear you, Rena, or I didn't,
I didn't either.
but I saw your lips moving.
My internet has been cutting in and out, so
We just got you this
apologies.
Okay.
So let's go on to the next question because I think it is low right now.
Sure. Larry.
Well, Dana and Rena and colleagues, congratulations for a first grade study. Congratulations for a second grade study. And I really do agree with your characterization that it has potential enormous implications beyond the regions in Afghanistan you worked with. My question goes a little bit to generalizability. If I understand right, you have a reduced sample of schools because NGOs perceived that it was dangerous to ask these questions in other places. So would it be fair to say that the more the perceived danger, the less the legit? How does the fact that you're studying communities where it's safer to ask these questions as opposed to less safe, how does that affect your interpretation?
Well, that's a great question. We do get to that question a little bit, I think, with the discussion of security. Rena, do you feel like you want to speak to that a little bit further?
I absolutely think you're right that, of course, we are not looking at the most, hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes, yes.
The
There's a
most
delay, I think.
Okay. Who knew Austria had bad internet? But of course, we are not looking at the most insecure regions in Afghanistan. I think doing this sort of study is challenging enough in Afghanistan anywhere, let alone in those regions where it is completely impossible, as many of you know, and Larry, I know you know that as well. But I think looking at the findings for the security incidents, we did find, as we showed, and we could even go back to that slide, that the greater the number of security incidents in a district, the greater the impact of the CVE on definitely provincial government legitimacy, but also, although it's not statistically significant, also on national government legitimacy, it seems.
Did you collect security incident data on the full sample of communities or just the restricted sample?
The security incident data was, and I can look up the exact source.
Well, the reason I ask is because you could examine whether the communities that were nominated as too dangerous to ask that question, whether they had more security incidents or not. This is such an important and fascinating set of findings that for exactly what Dana mentioned, which is its relevance and implications for other places. So that's why I'm so curious about it.
We use databases that recorded security incidents to map the security, and we can get that across the country. The same database is available. So we could probably, the problem is we only have these legitimacy questions for those 4 provinces that I mentioned. And although they're predominantly Hazara, they're not exclusively Hazara. I should also mention that.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. It's a great question. Elizabeth?
Yeah, thank you, Dana, Rena, colleagues, and echoing Jennifer and Larry. Of course, this is super impressive, and we know how much work went behind it and how very difficult it was to do. So it's really exciting to see you bring it together today and to share it with all of us. So my question has to do with legitimacy in particular, and sort of the theory of legitimacy as it applies to this particular context. So I understand that the general idea is that the provision of public goods, including education, raises government legitimacy. And I wonder, I'm thinking about some of my work on this question in other contexts, and I wonder if you might be able to tell us a little bit more about the story in this particular context as to if and how that applies. So what do Afghans think or say makes the government more legitimate? And so I'll tell you just a quick little story. In the Philippines, we gathered similar data on our community-driven development intervention in over 100 communities. And what we found, for instance, was that trust in government, which is the way that you're measuring legitimacy, was really high despite really bad service provision. And what we found out through our qualitative work, well, and also that it differed at different levels, right? Across the different levels you're asking about as well. And so what we found was that through our qualitative work, that people thought that legitimacy meant different things at different levels of government in different contexts. So for instance, a local government legitimacy was that, well, we know they have no power, they can't do anything, but they stuck with us through hard times. So that makes the local government legitimate. And then it would be a different story about what would make the national government or religious leaders legitimate. And so I was wondering if you had a sense, maybe from your qualitative work or your broader experience there, as to like, how much does this provision of public goods raise legitimacy, like theory, really hold up when you get into the actual story of the context?
That's also a great question. And, you know, really that is the area that I think would be really interesting to do more work on, to understand better the variations and understanding of legitimacy around in different contexts, but also particularly to go into more depth in relation to how Afghans in particular perceive government legitimacy. We didn't ask questions that get at that definition. It would have been great if we had. It would have been fabulous to have done that in qualitative interviews. And I think the extent of instrument testing that we, for example, you and I and Daphne and Jennifer did in our Pakistan-Kenya study, perhaps if I had experienced that prior to carrying out the Afghanistan research, we would have had more data on the legitimacy measure, the trust in government. However, I think it could be something that we look into now. It would be quite different now, right? So, I mean, dramatically different in Afghanistan, but it might be interesting. We could still ask some interesting questions in relation to legitimacy. And we do plan to go back with phone calls to the same villages to ask about the community-based schools to see to what extent they're ongoing. So that's something we could probably add into that work. Thank you for the suggestion, well, the question that gives me the suggestion.
Yeah, thank you. And I bet it would mean different things pre and post too, right? I was also thinking, would it be legitimacy just by allowing the community-based school, given the broader context now, whereas we would presume it's like provision of the education. It might even be a lower bar.
It would be presumably dramatically different now, because I think, yes, it would be very different for all kinds of reasons. So it wouldn't be giving us data for this paper necessarily, but it would be giving us really interesting information regardless. Yeah, it's a great question. Jahanzeb.
Hi. As many of you know, I know a lot about this study firsthand. But still, I'm curious about a couple of things. First is you mentioned close to 200 qualitative interviews were conducted. So that seems like a very big number. And how, if you could say a little more about it, how the team come across the decision to conduct as many, one, and the second, the sequencing of the qualitative data collection, whether there was part of the plan from the beginning, or as data from quantitative methods started coming, more and more interviews were conducted. So this is, more or less like the first part of my question. The second part is some insights from qualitative data. If I'm correct, we did not see a lot of information or any from qualitative. It's a very important part, it seems, of the study. 200 interviews is not a small number, right? And so why, or whether, why was that not included in the slide? So I'm more interested, like, for example, the differences between Hazaras and Pashtuns in terms of their legitimacy of social services provided. Traditionally, my observation is Hazaras are they might have more, it might be more in terms of legitimacy of the government, not maybe very friendly towards that, but when it comes to education, my observation is they might be one of the first groups to jump to exploit an opportunity that provides education than maybe other ethnicities in Afghanistan. So if you could say a little bit more about that, that would be helpful.
Thank you so much. So very quickly, the interviews, I think what we're going to have to do is probably take it out of this paper since they didn't address it. Well, let me back up. There are some findings in our qualitative interviews that bolster this argument and speak to this argument, but most of our findings are directly connected to a different question, which is about public service motivation. So we asked public service and civil society actors what their motivation was for working on education programs. And we have another paper that describes the findings from that set of data. We did pull out a couple of quotes from those data that we were going to present here that show how government in the communities, government was fairly restricted in its abilities to support education. Rena, you were the one who pulled out those quotes actually, so I'll ask you in a second, but just to finish the responses, or actually, Rena, do you remember, do you want to say anything more about those qualitative interviews?
I can just, we looked a little bit at the mechanisms, not statistically because we didn't have the data for that, but understanding potential mechanisms on which that government legitimacy may have been conferred. One being misattribution to the government, and the qualitative data really showed that the government was not able to sort of take that attribution because they didn't even have the resources to be in the villages in which we were collecting data. I say we, but I was not part of the team at the time, so I can take no credit for that. So I can put one of those quotes in the chat just for a little bit of understanding what that shows, but I'll pass it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Rena. That was great, really helpful. Yeah, and then the other questions were about sequencing. We carried out the qualitative data collection. Actually, my team members who actually carried out the qualitative data collection, who are here on the call with us, will remember the exact timing, but my recollection is that it was in between our waves of data. The first wave was 2014, as I mentioned, 2014, 2015. The second was 2016, and I think we carried out the qualitative data around 2016, really trying to understand better, as I said, the motivations of the education providers, thinking about commitments to services, and the degree to which that mattered in order for the service to be successful. And then the last question was about, I think that's an excellent question about this reputation that Hazara communities have for their commitment, high level of commitment to education. So whether that would factor in, I think that's a good question. And we should look at it further and consider whether we should add something on that. Did I answer everything, John Zabe? Oh, good. I see your thumbs up. We could talk about it more later also. Larry, you have another question.
Only if no one else has a first question. Okay, then I'll go ahead. The more I think about this, the more I wonder about the assumption, I don't know what to call it, the premise that trust in government is a good proxy for legitimacy. And I'm not a political scientist or a political theorist, but I imagine those two are different in the political theory literature, number one. And number two, why wouldn't one just call it trust, since that's what you measured?
No, that's also a good question.
Trust in government has the advantage of being 2 syllables less than legitimate, no, but several more than that. And I think people know what trust is, and not everybody knows what legitimacy is. So I'm just,
Yeah.
it suddenly dawned on me,
Yeah, I think it's funny because Rena and I were talking about this presentation, the paper before the talk, and I said people are going to ask us exactly this question. I think we need to reflect on it a little bit further, but the reason for the use of legitimacy is because this is the word that organizations use, and this is the political goal is really, legitimate government, and there are strong arguments that others make about how to define legitimacy, but I think what we can do is a better job of explicating those links. Why do we think that trust and that trust is a proxy for legitimacy, and I think we do explain it in our paper in a little bit more detail, but probably we should add a little bit more, because I think it's an important question, which hasn't come up that much in our other presentations with political scientists, actually, but that doesn't matter, because I think as you know, in our work, we want to speak to the broadest possible audience. So I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you. Ian.
Thank you for the really interesting study. I keep thinking about what it means, the relationship between the community education and that increases the government's legitimacy in terms of the funders' perspective. In some cases, increasing legitimacy of the state may not always necessarily the goal, and vice versa. So I just was curious about your thoughts on how this is to be framed when we're approaching the funders, and your personal thoughts on that.
Certainly, you're right. I mean, there are plenty of cases where foreign actors don't want to support the government. Afghanistan, case in point at the moment, right? So, and hence, in part, that's why most aid has stopped to Afghanistan. That's part of the reason, right? That's a crucial reason. Having said that, there are many circumstances that are similar where governments are external forces, whether they're military or aid related, are interested in supporting the government, providing, buttressing the support that to that government for a whole range of reasons, right? So I think it applies to many circumstances, but it particularly was relevant and salient in these 20 years of US state building in Afghanistan. That's true. It would have been similar in Iraq as well during the time the US was really actively engaged in state building in Iraq. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think, are we done at 10 to, I don't recall the timing. Are we out of?
We can go until noon.
Okay. Rena was about to say something else. Go ahead, Rena.
Johansa was asking for the slide that describes indices, and I was going to suggest that you go to those 2 extra slides at the end that actually show what those questions are.
Yeah, thank you.
And I just I'll add a couple more thoughts on those questions, which is that, as Dana said, legitimacy is almost synonymous with trust in government in a lot of the political science literature. But I would say that these questions are going a step beyond that. It's trust, satisfaction, and who has you can see with this first question, blank officials are best able to say what is best for children's education. So it's that they have the right and the power to control education, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the first set of items, and then the second is this. Oops. this one. So I'll go back to the first. Jahanzip.
Yeah, so just I think getting back to Larry's question, my question, I guess, is when if you recall, when these items in these indices were developed, these measures, do you recall, or you have any information that have they been used to measure legitimacy in other studies, in political science or somewhere else?
So we created these questions with Joel back in 2014, I want to say. And for sure, we looked at other examples, but I don't recall.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't recall.
These are like, the measures are great. I'm sure, trust, satisfaction, and one or two others that are on the list, I think they do contribute to, develop this measure of legitimacy, but I just am maybe more evidence or reference might be helpful to, further enhance the legitimacy of the legitimacy measure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, that was I was alluding to the work that you know well about that we did on creating our measures with Daphna and Elizabeth and Jennifer, and in our Think study. And we did not do that in this case. We didn't survey a lot of other studies that looked at legitimacy and trust that I recall. I actually will check with Joel on that. And we didn't spend that level. We didn't carry out that level of detail review of the items. But of course today that is something we would have done. Yeah. Rena, do you want to add anything else to that?
I was not involved in the development of the scales, but I can speak to looking at scales that other scholars have used, and these ask more questions about different aspects of legitimacy. So I'm guessing that was how they were put together as well. Initially, looking at more facets of legitimacy. Most of the other indices that at least I saw used in the literature, primarily in political science literature, are looking at just one facet of legitimacy, whereas this study was looking at multiple facets.
Yeah. And also I think, at the time, there was a lot less research, a lot less evidence on these kinds of questions. A number of the studies that we cited were, the ones that were conducted in foreign contexts were more recent.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thanks. Anything else in our last 3 minutes?
So a question in the chat about the weighted least squares approach. I'm happy to read that unless you want to just read it and answer it directly. Or
I can't see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Peter asks, I noticed that weighted least squares regression with cluster robust standard errors was used throughout. Was a multi-level modeling approach considered?
I'll ask Rena to speak to that.
I don't know if a multi-level model approach was considered, because by the time I was involved, we were already working with the weighted least squares regression model. But we could ask Cyrus about that and get back to you.
I'm gonna sort of use my privilege as the host to ask maybe the final question, which is, I've seen papers in totally different contexts where there's sort of indirect measures of relationship between citizens and the state, and in this study, it seems like everything is, the outcome measures are all collected by surveys, and I'm wondering if there's any kind of like indirect ways to get at folks' trust in the state or legitimacy in government. And I mean, I'm thinking like in New York, for example, people have looked at the frequency that people engage with government services, the rate at which people call 311, for example. And, again, I don't know in Afghanistan if there's sort of comparable or other kinds of ways to get at this, but I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts, like, are there ways to measure the things you're interested in that don't require like just asking people?
That's a great question. We need to look maybe a little bit more deeply at other databases. I think the Asia Foundation research is a source that we could look to, but we did actually look for everything that we could find from other surveys in Afghanistan that explored anything related to citizen government interaction. There isn't a lot out there. There isn't even, for example, I mean, some of the national standardized tests aren't carried out in Afghanistan. The even the aid data surveys most of them aren't carried out in Afghanistan. So there's not a lot to choose from, but we could look a little bit further for anything else that might be relevant. I think that's a great idea, just to make sure that we've left no stone unturned. There isn't a 311 number to call, unfortunately, as you suspect.
Yeah.
Wish there were 911 and 311 for that matter. I know we're at 12 o'clock. I realize that I introduced my colleagues and they're probably not prepared to speak, but Joed, Hamidullah, Abdulhamid, do you want to add anything just in 30 seconds before we go, or if that's okay? I'm sorry that I didn't say this sooner.
Thank you, Dana. No, it was so great to listen to how the analysis part and now how it all came together. I could just recall my memories with collecting data for this amazing project. But just quickly with this legitimacy part, all those actors that were there, we asked participants about to what extent they thought they were involved or were best placed to war-based place. And then we also asked about how satisfied they were with each of those different actors at different levels. So we had many questions when it came to this legitimacy part. And I think Rena talked about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So in the interest of time, I'd say maybe we should end things here, and I'm going to thank our speakers again on behalf of everybody for their wonderful talk, and hope to see folks at the next PRIISM seminar. So thank you again so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Ravi. And thank you everyone at PRIISM, and thanks to our team who are here with us on the call. We're so grateful to all the work that you've done. And if you have additional thoughts, Joed and Abdulhamid and Hamidullah, maybe you can email them to Ravi or me.
It is super. I mean, we are all happy to be here and see the result of the study. Yeah, looking forward to see the work published.
Thank you so much.